Welcome back to the Jewish Futurism Lab, where we unpack Torah, tech, and tomorrow. I'm your host, Mike Wirth, Jewish futurist, community artist, and design educator, coming to you from Crown Town, Charlotte, North Carolina. Today, we are asking a question that sounds like it belongs in a galaxy far, far away, but lands right here in the weekly Torah portion. What happens when the stories we love most, our science fiction, our fantasy, our rebels, time travels, Jedi, point us back to the oldest question in Judaism? Who are we becoming, and how do we get there? Let's get together with Rabbi Danny Burkeman of Temple Shir Tikva in Wayland, Mass. Let's get into it, y'all. All right, friends, welcome back to the lab. My guest today is my friend and Rabbi Danny Burkeman. He's the senior rabbi at Temple Shir Tikva in Wayland, Mass. He was raised in the British Reform movement, ordained in 2009, and has served congregations from London to Port Washington, LA to Metro West Boston. He also hosts 2 Minutes of Torah, one of the top 7 Jewish podcasts in the world right now. And his whole rabbinical project is about making Judaism alive, urgent, and impossible to ignore. But what I really wanted to talk to Danny about today is this. He absolutely loves science fiction, and it's contagious. We're talking Doctor Who, Star Trek, and Andor, the Star Wars series that may be the most morally serious piece of popular storytelling in years. Here is the question underneath it all. What does it mean that Musar, a Jewish practice of character repair, of naming your moral weakness and then doing the slow work of reshaping them, shows up vividly in a story about resistance and sacrifice? Cassian Andor's arc maps almost exactly on the Cheshbon HaNefesh, an accounting of the soul. The future is not something that we predict. It is something that we build through the stories we love and the people we're choosing to become. So friends, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Danny Burkeman. Friends, we're here. We're excited with the amazing Rabbi Danny Burkeman. We're here at his home base of Temple Shir Tikva in his office, and I'm looking around and I see all these incredible science fiction and Jewish things here in this space. Danny, welcome. We're very happy to have you here.
It's great to be here with you, and I always think that if you look around my office, you get a sense of all of my interests in one place. There's different elements of all the different things that I enjoy watching and seeing and engaging with.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing stormtroopers holding up your Torah study copy. I see even football towels for Liverpool.
And the TARDIS on the wall with the clock. I mean, Doctor Who's an important part of it. And a few Ted Lasso references. Really, Doctor Who, Star Wars, Liverpool, and Ted Lasso, I think, dominate the... and Lego sets. They are the things that dominate the setup in my office for people to see.
Excellent. Yes, I'm seeing multiple Lego sets here and complicated ones at that. So hopefully those were good memories.
We're especially proud of the Millennium Falcon in the corner. And I always tell the story that when I was growing up, my parents couldn't get me the Millennium Falcon. It was too expensive as a set. But when the Lego set came up in my adult life, they bought me the Lego Millennium Falcon. So they still fulfilled that pledge and got me the Millennium Falcon. And it was great building it and having it now out on display for everyone to see.
And you're talking about the old Kenner Millennium Falcon that you could open up and
those original Star Wars toys that we all of our generation collected and had loads. And I think they're in my basement, some in my parents' attic, and all those places.
They were amazing toys. Well, that's wonderful that came full circle. So, Danny, we want to get to know you. Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story and how you became Rabbi Danny?
It's funny to think about where it starts, because I don't know that there's an obvious starting point in terms of my Jewish journey that brings me to being here as a rabbi. There's lots of different kind of pathways that kind of intersected that ultimately led me to this point and to that decision to kind of pursue rabbinical studies and now to be a rabbi and to continue with this type of work. I grew up in a home where Judaism was just part of the home. My mother is Israeli, my dad's British. We grew up in London, and I don't remember a time when Judaism just wasn't an ever-present. And so it was just always something that was there. We went to a Reform synagogue in London. I also went to an Orthodox elementary school. So there was something interesting of
Oh,
that kind of contrast of the Orthodox education that I was getting during the day, 5 days a week, and then going to the religious school in the Reform setting and recognizing that there was something different. So there was an interesting insider outsider thing, even within the Jewish community then, through until I was 11 years old in that context. After that, the synagogue really was the center of my Jewish life for several years. We were regular attendees at Friday night services. At the religious school, my parents were teachers there. And through that, I then got involved in Jewish summer camp. And I think that's where my personal connection and love of Judaism developed in spending 2 weeks with RSY Netzer, which is a British Reform youth movement, going summer camp. And I did that for 10 years, I think, in total, from being a camper to being a counselor to actually being the head of one of the camps. And it was just that sense of connecting with Judaism in a way that was relevant to me and that engaged me at my age and stage of life that was really powerful. And parallel to that, I always think was the Israel connection because my family were in Israel. We would go to Israel once a year to visit with my grandparents.
oh,
They would come to visit us once a year. And so there was this sense of Judaism and Israel were really important parts of my identity,
constants.
constant things for me. And I think that I would have said that the Jewish part of my identity probably was the dominant part of my identity in many ways growing up because my mother obviously grew up in Israel, was new to England. My dad's, well, he was born in England. His mother came from Germany, so she was new to England.
Mm-hmm.
His father's family went a little further back, but in general, we didn't have this long established British identity of being in London for several generations. We were relatively new there in different ways. And so I think the thing that we had as an identity kind of anchor was that sense of Jewish identity and those connections. And that led me when I was finishing high school to spend a year in Israel,
Oh,
studying, working, engaging with Judaism and Israeli culture, Israeli education, and all those kind of things. And really just wanting to keep doing that and continue doing elements of that while at college, throughout being involved in the Jewish community there and frequent trips to Israel. In England, it's much easier to get to Israel than it is from America. I mean, we're
right.
talking a few hours on the plane.
Yeah.
And when I was graduating college, at the time, I would have told you that I wanted to go into media. That was my
Oh,
aspiration. I'd wanted to do that for the longest time. But
like journalism,
journalism
media?
type
Yeah.
thing, primarily radio actually was what I was
Nice.
always passionate about. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go work for my youth movement for a year and give back in that way. And I did that. And then there was an opportunity to work supporting all of the youth movements across the Jewish spectrum for a couple of years. And so I thought, I'd do that. And as I was in that job, I really had to decide what was I going to do next. And journalism wasn't so front and center for me anymore. I was thinking about the things that I wanted to do and engage with, and it came down to really a choice of moving to Israel and seeing what that could be like, or embarking on the rabbinic studies. And the reason I wanted to embark on the rabbinic studies was the things that I was passionate about, that I enjoyed, building community, connecting with people, Judaism, the culture, the teaching, the engaging, all of that I felt I could do in becoming a rabbi.
Hmm.
I often think now that what I thought a rabbi was versus what a rabbi is
Oh,
were quite far removed, but it was
interesting.
that sense of being able to kind of fully immerse myself in that that was really important. And it was a journey that had some stops and starts in it. I started off in London studying there. That was not a great experience.
Hmm.
Spent my second year in Israel. That was a wonderful experience, both for the studies and because I met my wife there, and we met in that context.
Wow.
And then I followed her to Los Angeles and spent 3 years studying there. So I have this interesting rabbinic journey that was London, Jerusalem, and LA over the 5 years. And I think that was really helpful as well to kind of learn in a different environment. And I think in some ways London was just too familiar. I knew the people, I knew the
Hmm.
setting. Going out on this journey, I think, was really helpful. And that's got me to the point of being a rabbi, of fulfilling that part of the studies. And then after that, there was the opportunity to work in London for a couple of years and then move to the States. And so for the last 15 years now, I've worked as a rabbi in the American Jewish community. And that's where I feel passionate about the Jewish future and the work that I get to do, and really appreciate that I was lucky to have a wonderful community in Port Washington on Long Island, the community synagogue there, and really super blessed to have ended up here at Temple Shir Tikva in Wayland, just outside of Boston, which is just a spectacular community that's really a wonderful fit for me, but not just for me, for my family as a whole.
Amazing. Wow, what a journey. Lech Lecha, it sounds
Yes,
like.
yes.
And Port Washington is my neck of the woods. Yeah. That's fantastic. So where in Israel was your mother from?
She grew up in Tel Aviv, so she was in Tel Aviv. Her parents were shopkeepers. That was they were in that wave of Aliyah where people kind of had shops and different things in the Tel Aviv area, and she spent her whole life there. And I think were it not for the fact that she met my dad, she would have probably lived her life there. I think she was very connected to the place, but he was English, she was Israeli, and I think it was just easier in some ways to be in the English context, especially with the language, rather than him moving there. So she moved and ended up there.
And you mentioned Abba's parents came from Germany, but where did Mom's parents come from to end up in Israel? Or were they there the whole time?
Her dad was the first, my grandfather, my Saba, was the first of his family born in Israel, but he's from family from Austria originally. His dad, actually, the story goes, his dad went to Israel to see what they didn't have, and he realized that they didn't have cutlers. So back in the day, the people who would sharpen knives and make the cutlery. And so he went back to Austria. They agreed to train him as a Jew on the condition that he would not work in Austria. That was the deal. I mean, because there's still some of that anti-Semitism and whatever else. So they trained him, and then he moved to Israel and set up these shops. And my grandfather, my Saba, worked there all his life. In some ways, it would have been better had he found a different gap in the market, because cutler's not the best profession as we get into the modern age. But he did that. And my Safta, my grandmother, she was born in Romania, but she moved there when she was 2 years old. So they were both very Zionist families that were really committed to this idea of the state of Israel, and were there at the Declaration of Independence and really lived through all of those key dates in the formation of Israel and in its early years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. So we talked earlier about your love for science fiction. Take us back in your origin story, and like, when did you see things that you now love today, right? Doctor Who, Star Wars, Star Trek?
Yeah.
Yeah, you like
Yeah,
Star
yeah.
Trek? Okay. Yeah, you do have a... Oh, no, that's Seinfeld.
Yes, Seinfeld's there as well.
I was like, is this the bridge of the Enterprise? No, it's the
shape
Seinfeld
actually
set.
could be, I guess, in that way. I think that my mother was into science fiction, and so I think she shared that with us. And the Star Wars movies, as a child, I was born in '79, so I didn't see them in the movie theaters, but they were just a key part of my childhood, and just that sense of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and all of those stories were just embedded in my being, if you will, and as part of my interests from a very young age. And Star Trek as well, that was the TV show that you got to watch. And so she was into that. And I remember watching the original series, and then Next Generation being on TV.
All right, all the movies came out
And the
when we
movies,
were
yes.
young.
Star Trek 4 especially, the Voyage Home is the one that I like. That
The
was
whales.
that was my Star Trek movie with the whales. Yes.
You saw it in the theater?
I don't think I saw it in the theater. I don't. The only movie I remember seeing in the theater in terms of the sci-fi genre was Mark Hamill did a movie when I was younger, I mean. But Mark Hamill was in some movie, I guess in the late 80s, I would guess. It flopped, didn't do anything, as most of his, unfortunately, movies did after Star Wars.
Typecasted, right.
But I remember going to see that, very excited to see Luke Skywalker on the screen. And it was just, these were the stories, those were the toys that I played with. Doctor Who's an interesting one, because I remember it when I was a child, but it was in its waning years at that point. And when it came back, I remember the big deal about it coming back, and watching a couple of the first episodes and not really connecting with it. But it was actually when I was living in LA and studying, and I found it on Netflix with David Tennant, and I think into that period started watching it live then again. And Doctor Who, it's one that could have been throughout my life, but is really an adult science fiction interest, even though it predates all of the other ones in some ways. But it's the one that, and it's the one that I think I disappear into a lot until Disney Plus came out with all the Star Wars, making everything accessible and all the content that they keep putting out. Doctor Who was really that escape. If I want to just put something on, I'd put an episode on.
Yeah, and for folks in the States, right? Like seasons and series are used differently to describe television shows, right? And then, of course, there's always the famous Doctor Who Christmas episode.
Yes, they do a Christmas special, which is a big thing in England. There are some of these interesting cultural elements when you make the move that in England, the Christmas special is in some ways how you know a show has arrived. If they get a special show on Christmas, then they must be really popular. And they'll do a special themed show, which always has some Christmas themes or New Year's themes around it. And it's often set slightly out of time in the flow of the general narrative, although still has to be part of it. And so the Doctor Who Christmas special is a big thing, and it would always be a big special episode, often with a special guest star joining the cast. And there's some great episodes, and there was going to be a Christmas special, they said, and now there isn't going to be one, and we're in this hiatus of Doctor Who right now, which is challenging after it. But maybe it needs a bit of time to reset a little bit. The last couple of seasons maybe could have done with a little work from where I sit as a fan.
Nice. I mean, I'm limited in Doctor Who. You're the person I know who loves it the most in my world. It was hard to get access to it in the U.S. for a long time, unless you had it on tape. But the Sci-Fi Channel in the 90s was like, they'd run the old episodes, and I was like, wait, there was other Doctor? Like, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, you get this. It's really interesting because there's the Christopher Eccleston Doctor is the modern incarnation that Russell T Davies brought back, that most people kind of connect with, and that you could access ultimately on BBC America and then on Netflix and HBO and it's jumped around. I think it's on AMC Plus now or wherever it might be. So it just jumps around to these different providers. But predating that, there are all these other Doctors that go back, I mean, I think it's 60 years at this point. And in the British context, it really is part of British culture. If in England, if you talk about a TARDIS, everyone knows what you're talking about, whether you watch the show or not. And that's to explain, that's the Doctor's space vehicle, time and relative dimensions in space, TARDIS. And so it's a blue phone box, but it's an iconic image that everyone in England will know what you mean by a TARDIS. And you even get it referenced in other pop culture. So in the musical Matilda, there's one line in the song that says, like a TARDIS. And everyone knows that means it's bigger on the inside. That's the whole motif of what the TARDIS is. It's you step into this police box and it's a huge spaceship. It just expands exponentially and infinitely. And so Doctor Who just is part of British culture in a really interesting way. And I still don't know if there's the same kind of American piece today, at least, that has just been absorbed in that way with that kind of longevity. And I think it's partly because just growing up again in England, fewer TV channels, fewer choices. The things that were big were really big because there weren't multiple channels to be watching and multiple things to get absorbed by.
Choice burnout, right? There was like, well, this is it, and that's going to be it. That's fantastic. So, you're consuming these things. Mom is a sci-fi influence on you at a young age. Did you start to see connections to your studies with Judaism, or even in your life at the time, that you were like, that made sense?
The connection that I think has always resonated for me is that idea of going out on the journey, and in some ways maybe coming back as well. And I think that's you see that in Star Wars, essentially, that Luke Skywalker starts on his home planet and then ends up back there in Return of the Jedi, and that kind of the hero's journey, I think Joseph Campbell kind of motif, and that's a really powerful idea of embarking on our journeys and what it means to go on that journey with the sense of mission to do something out there, to make a difference in some way. And I think that's what we see in the Star Wars story, that we have these different characters who are at different parts of the journey. Leia is kind of born into it. That's just what she does. She's part of this resistance, the rebellion, and fighting against the Empire. Luke has to go away, find it, and then he ends up coming back to kind of fulfill his destiny in that way, being part of that endeavor. And Han Solo kind of reluctantly just gets dragged along and somehow ends up committing and being a crucial figure in that way. And I think there's something really interesting about the hero's journey as literature, but also as religious motif. And I think we get it in our biblical books in that way. And I think that was one of the connections that was always there for me, that idea of, especially we think about Moses as a character, that born in Egypt, has his early life in Egypt, has to leave
right.
to go to Midian and to be with Jethro and meet Zipporah, and then have the experience of the burning bush. And then he can come back to be the person who saves the people in that way. And I think that then he embarks on that journey to the promised land. And in some ways, you could see Torah, the 5 books of Moses as a whole, as being the kind of hero's journey, that we start with this pledge with Abraham going to Canaan, the promised land. This is the land we're supposed to be in. Ultimately, we end up leaving, and then the whole of Torah is trying to get back there. And I always think the powerful thing in Torah, which is just so interesting in thinking about science fiction or literature and such like, is they don't do it. In the 5 books, they're just on the other side of the Jordan. Don't cross over. We don't read the culmination climax in those 5 books. You have to turn the page and get into the next series, into Joshua, to get there. And I think there's something also about that idea of what does it mean to be aspiring to a promised land that I think permeates science fiction, in that sense of the potential, that there's often in science fiction the critique of society and of different elements of what's happening around us, but with a belief that things could be better, that we could get to a better place. I think the Star Trek's image of the Federation is in some ways utopian.
Definitely.
And it's that kind of promised land of what could be possible, and in many ways implicit therefore is the critique of what is, instead of imagining what could be. And I think Star Wars as well has that sense, and some of the more contemporary material has even gone further into that. But that idea of how do we fight against the forces, the darkness, it's very like common motifs, if you will. And I think that fits in the Jewish context with, again, what does it mean to be on a journey to a promised land, and that need, desire to, in the words given to Abraham, to be a blessing and to bring blessing into the world, or to be a light unto the nations, whatever it might be. But there's this aspirational quality to religious life and to Judaism that I think you see in science fiction, of the escapism of imagining what it could be and how it could be better, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well said. It sounds like you've been studying this stuff for a good while. Yeah, I love the comparison of the Star Trek and Star Wars, right? Star Wars isn't necessarily dystopian, but it has this, like you're saying, this sense of we're going somewhere, right? We're going to be in a better place. Whereas Star Trek, it's like, we're already in a pretty good place. Let's go see what's out there, right? Like, let's explore and be outbound, right? In that sense. So also love, because I was talking to Max Clow last night about Joseph Campbell and the hero of 1,000 faces. So I'm so delighted that you brought that up. That is very embedded in our mythology, and seemingly the world, right, according to Campbell. Pivoting here, did you have any, like, who's the Doctor Who of the Torah for you? And Luke Skywalker, maybe you said Avraham, right? Maybe, but who are your heroes?
It's really interesting, because I think that, and we get this in science fiction as well, that the characters are often flawed in some way. Like, Luke Skywalker's great, but he's also impulsive and goes against the advice of his teachers a couple of times, and therefore, is it going to work out? Isn't it going to work out? The intervention eventually. I think we can do spoilers at this point for Return of the Jedi, but it requires that external intervention for the story to culminate. He is not able to finish the job himself. That he wasn't ready, and I think there's this element of the flawed nature of some of these characters that I think is so important, and even the Doctor, who is this time traveling, amazing character, often the companions and people who engage with him talk about him being the most amazing person they've ever met. But even he's flawed in the way that he responds to certain situations and goes through this growth with the key concept in Doctor Who that's important to be aware of if you haven't watched the show is this idea of regeneration. So the Doctor doesn't really die. He has two hearts. And so there's this sense of when he dies, he is reborn immediately with a new face and a new character. It's a perfect way to deal with actors leaving a show and allow them to continue the show beyond that first incarnation, and is one of the reasons why it is the longest running, I think, sci-fi show on TV. But it means that there's this sense of each Doctor brings with their personality, which is often flawed. There are elements of them that is not perfect, and I think that's one of the things that resonates with the biblical figures. I think our biblical characters are flawed. None of them are perfect. They all behave in ways that are challenging, that cause us to question some of what they do. And that's one of the struggles in terms of when we're trying to kind of relate to them and to look up to them, is I think we look up to them in some ways for some of the things they do, and then there are other elements that are more challenging. So Abraham is a great example of that he's this amazing character who goes on this journey. He argues with God around Sodom and Gomorrah, but when he's told to sacrifice his own son, it's essentially shrug of the shoulders, okay, and goes off and does it. And I think there's those pieces that are interesting in our biblical figures that are also interesting in some of the science fiction characters. And I think that there is that sense of, with Abraham, you get it a lot, and with Moses as well, of this journeying. And I think that the willingness to go on the journey and the journey into the unknown is part of that, if you will, that religious motif, but also that science fiction motif. Like you said it in Star Trek, it's about things are good, but let's see what's out there. And I think there's that sense with Abraham at the very beginning of, I'm going to go on a journey and see where that takes me. God says go on a journey, and he's off. Right. And to see this land that he doesn't know what it's going to look like, he doesn't get any details really.
Could be his peril. Yeah.
And that's it. But he embarks on it, and he has the faith in it. And I think that there's that piece at the beginning, though, of the call of that idea of what does it mean to be a blessing and to bring blessing. And that's the challenge, I think, of how do we make a difference in the world, and how do we make the world better than we found it in some ways. And I think, again, that's often what we see in the science fiction genre, is that sense of how can we make things better. There's often a threat, a challenge that the protagonists are dealing with and facing, that's trying to improve the situation that we find ourselves in. And sometimes more obviously, sometimes less obviously, but a lot of the negative characters are in place of commentary on contemporary society. And I think that's one of the powerful things about science fiction, in the way that it allows us to think about our contemporary situation through this lens of science fiction. And I think Torah does that as well. It gives us ways to think about our contemporary situation around that lens. And in terms of the characters, I do think there is that piece, I think, if we would think about the Doctor, that Moses as a figure is flawed, but he's the one who's helping the people to kind of realize their potential, if you will. He's helping them go on their journey. And I think that's often what the Doctor is doing with the companions and just with humanity as a whole, and sometimes with alien species and different things in terms of where the journeys take him. But it is that sense of being the guide who's trying to help on that journey. And often the journey has elements that are related to the big picture of issues and things that are happening, but often it's about the journey of the individual, especially in Doctor Who, the companion, and how they are growing through that experience. And I wonder if maybe there's an element of that with Moses and the Israelites growing through his leadership, and in some ways actually at the culmination being ready to continue the journey without him. That's the success of Moses. The success of Moses is that the people can go on without him.
So the Israelites as a whole become grace, right, or the other companions.
Yeah, they get to the next stage in that way, and I think that's what often happens with the Doctor and the companions, that often you see them grow through however many episodes they're with him for, or her, as we've had both, and then they're ready to kind of leave and go off on their own adventures and their own journeys. We got that a lot, I think, with the doctors from Russell T Davies, and then with I'm blanking on the one who took over from him, but those two writers around Tennant's doctor, Christopher Eccleston's doctor, Matt Smith's doctor, Peter Capaldi's doctor, all of those doctors, I think you can see the growth of their companions, that they then do their own thing afterwards, and I think that's, in some ways, we can see that in the Torah, that Moses' gift to the people is to take them out of Egypt and prepare them to enter the promised land, so that they can do it, not him doing it for them.
And that, right, famous moment atop Mount Nebo, right?
Yeah.
The seeing the land but not entering it, right? I mean, I'm really loving all these connections. And have you ever found that a science fiction story was easier to use as a way to explain something within a Torah story?
The one that I've gone to a few times recently has been talking about, at least in current times, around Andor as a series that
Yeah.
I've really connected with that show. I've watched it several times through, and I think there's something in there about, at the heart of what I think Judaism's telling us is about the power of the individual to make a difference. I think that's part of the motif, like the individual in the context of community can make an immense difference that is outsized to what one person would imagine that they can do. And I think that's the challenge of Judaism in terms of what it means to be a blessing, to kun olam, that idea of repairing the world. All of those different concepts come down to that idea of the power that the individual really has to make a difference. And Andor, I think, is this really interesting example of the power of the individual to make a difference in his, I mean, he's just this random character, and no force, no power, nothing specific, but
No real criminal record like Han Solo.
he's not a great he's not a great guy when we meet him. I mean, you can see with some of the interactions with his friends and the people around him that he's not the best guy out there. And yet he goes on this journey, grows, and being in the right place at the right time advances him. And the other thing that I always think is interesting in the Andor story is the role of Cyril, the one who's pursuing him initially and who makes that decision that he's going to make that his life's work, essentially. And again, I don't want to spoil it, but he's the one pursuing him. And because of that sets in motion some other things that then lead to where we get to with the plans and which goes into Rogue One, that goes into episode 4. And I do think one of the things that I always like in Torah is in the Joseph story, there's the part where he's 17 years old, I think it is, and he's going to find his brothers, and we read that he meets an Ish, this random person, and he says, "Do you know where my brothers are?" Which, like, why would this person know anyway? But whatever, that's the setup. And the person does, and he directs Joseph to go where he's supposed to go. And then he goes on that journey, and that journey, at one point, that leads to him being in a pit with his brothers about to kill him. Then he gets sold in slavery. Then suddenly he rises to the top of Potiphar's house, and then back to the very bottom when he's sent back into the prison and to the jail. And then when he interprets Pharaoh's dream, right to the top. And there's the role of the Ish in that narrative that I always wonder about what Joseph thought about him at various points along his story in terms of this crucial figure in his life who I'm sure he hated at points and was grateful for at other points. But it's that way that the unknown person can advance the story. And I think we see that in Andor. And I think we see that in Cassian's life in some way as well, specifically that he's got these moments where it's going in a good direction. Then, I mean, when he's on Narkina, whatever the number is, Narkina 5, I think it is, right at the bottom, but then out and then up, and this kind of sense. And I think there's and I think there's an element of the Joseph piece in it, that at different points in his story, he probably reflected on different people and different decisions in different ways. But it's that way that the unknown figure, and because he doesn't know who Cyril is until I mean, he doesn't even know him at the end. He are in that, again, I don't want to give spoilers away, but in the crucial scene between the two of them, towards the end of in season 2, he says, "Who are you?" I mean, like he doesn't know, and yet he's such a crucial person in Cyril's life, even with that dimension.
He doesn't feel he truly knows him.
Yeah, and I think there's that piece of how the narrative advances, and again, in that show, which is clearly a critique on society. I mean, it's a brilliant way of critiquing lots of what's going on in the world today in the Star Wars universe. But again, I think there is that sense of the power of the individuals comes across in that way, that Cyril, Cassian, I mean, all of them, there's these ways that Luthen, that all of them have these different influences that, and they're unknown. And I love that piece of it, because we get to, those of us in our generation, we grew up, episode 4 was the beginning.
We never knew of the Andor.
We didn't know anything.
We only heard people died for this.
These plans, that was it. They built this entire thing on the idea people died for these plans, did Rogue One,
right.
And you wouldn't have thought after watching Rogue One that Cassian was going to be the figure that you'd build a whole series around. Like, he was not the focus there. And yet you get back and back, and I love that element of, again, everything that happens that they're able to do at the end of episode 4, without Cassian, and without him even being stopped when he's on that holiday planet, and then his experiences in Arcane 5 that really inspire him, it seems, to kind of join the rebellion, none of it happens. And the chance that it takes, and I think that's the other interesting piece that I sometimes think about with Star Wars especially, and we get that implication in Andor, is the hidden hand behind things. So there's that idea of the Force, and he meets that Force healer who says, "I can see within you all this stuff." And I think there's that piece sometimes that for the religious person, it's not that we see God directly intervening and doing this or doing that, but there's the little hand in the background that just gives the right push to be in the right place at the right time, even if you don't realize you're going to be there. And I think that's something that we get in those series, and it's a wonderful piece of literature and of religious law, if you will, and specifically Judaism, that the difference that can make, and looking out for it, hearing it and seeing it, even if we don't realize it in the moment.
Incredible. All right, I'm obviously coming to shul this
Great.
weekend. So can't wait to connect on this. You said something earlier when you were talking about how your mom was an influence for you for science fiction. Is there any great Israeli science fiction that, like, I've just never heard of or you know about?
I'm not aware of any Israeli science fiction. That was not the way she connected to it. I mean, it was much more the kind of classic sci-fi,
the Western
the
stuff.
Western sci-fi that I think we're familiar with. It's interesting I wonder if there is any now. I'd be curious, and I think it's interesting. I mean, the way that kind of I think Judaism and some of the biblical stories permeate Western society. You can see the influences, I think, in those ways, even if there isn't a direct Israeli sci-fi motif. But I think there's something about the optimism, the faith in the future, all those things kind of permeate through.
Yeah. I mean, for the class that I gave last night about Jewish futurist ritual design, I had to dig back 100 years ago. Boris Schatz, who's the founder of the Bezalel School, he wrote a novella that was like a futuristic utopian story about Jerusalem rebuilt. And it was supposed to be in 2018 that all this took place. So we kind of used that as an example, but I couldn't find anything else that was like no Israeli Star Trek ripoff or like.
I don't know. I wonder if they have anything. It'd be interesting to think about it in terms of the motifs that they've gone for and what's really resonated in Israeli culture and Jewish culture, even to a certain degree. I think that
it tends to be more historic things, even more contemporary recounts of things.
And I think that for Jewish community, in some ways, that the superhero motif feels more central as an idea than the science fiction motif in some ways.
In space and aliens.
Yeah, I think it's more this worldly in that way, but I do think there is again, even if we think about Israel and that context of that society and Betzalel and all those other places that were established there,
Mm-hmm.
and the dream that must have been for that to be possible.
Mm.
Now, of course, there'd always been Jews there and connected there, but that movement to establish a homeland, to create this new society, that's kind of, it is fantastical
Right.
that these young kids, I mean, they were like late teens, early 20s. They thought they could establish a country and that they could establish a new society and really a vision of what this society could be at its best. And they followed that aspiration. And to be able to have built that, I think that goes back to kind of some of the ongoing journey that is Judaism. I think Judaism as a religion is a religion that is constantly journeying towards a promised land, which in the science fiction terms is that kind of utopian vision of what's possible, however it's realized. And that's the power of Jewish understanding. We're never there. We're always trying to get there. And I think that's embedded in that way that the five books of Moses, the Torah, finishes, but continues in the Jewish experience throughout generations, of that kind of sense of how can we get to a better place. And in overcoming all of the challenges throughout history, there are those motifs of kind of triumphing over these evil forces, if you will, at various points in various ages and stages of the last several thousand years, but still being here. And I think there's an enduring power to that, just that story alongside the texts that support it and are accompany it.
And I'm thinking here, like, I'm in my head going, okay, yeah, that story's utopian. That story's utopian when I think about stuff from prophecy, as well as Kabbalah. I can't think of any dystopian, maybe Sodom and Gomorrah, but any dystopia, like of a bad world, like a warning of a bad world to come.
I think we get elements of responding to what the bad world is. So I think we've got that. I mean, we do have Sodom and Gomorrah. We have the world destroyed with Noah trying again. So
Right.
we've got in some early stages this sense of things can go really wrong, and God's going to intervene sometimes when it goes really wrong, although
Babel,
not since then.
right?
Yeah, that it can really go in that direction. But then I think what we have, which is through the prophetic books, really with Judges and then with the different prophets, is we have this sense of when it goes wrong, this is how it's going to go wrong, but this is the response. And I think that's the power of the prophets, that the dystopia is there as the contemporary experience, if you will. And so the prophets are speaking out of imagining what the future could be and trying to hold the people to account for how they should be behaving, what they should be doing. The power of that prophetic voice and being willing to kind of speak truth to power, to stand up to the evil forces that you see around you. I think that we get that with often the heroic figures who are willing to. It's the small group in many of the science fictions. It's not the masses initially. It's the small group who are willing to take the risk upon themselves because they cannot be silent in the face of the injustice, in the face of the evil, in the face of what's wrong, whoever it might be. And I think that's the prophetic books in many ways, often in an individual rather than a group, but that the prophets are speaking truth to power and speaking out against the dystopian context that they see themselves in, imagining what a better future could be like. And so I think that that's where it's contained, not that we're moving towards that, but rather that we need to speak out against that. And that's the Jewish textual tradition. Prophetic Judaism is railing again and again and again against the negative situations that they see themselves encountering and facing in the world, and how that the people need to do better, can do better with that aspiration. And in many ways, it fulfills a lot of the warnings that Moses gives at the end of Torah, that if you do this, this will happen. If you do that, that will happen. And that sense of what can happen with complacency and so on and so forth, that's embedded again in the religious context.
Let's talk a little bit about here now, right? And you're stationed here at Shir Tikva as the senior rabbi. Um, you know, the future's ahead of you. What's your vision for Shir Tikva, the community, yourself even, right? Like your impact that you'd like to see show up somehow? It's a big question.
It's a huge question, and I need to always take a moment to reflect on it. I think for me, there are a few things. At the heart of my work as a rabbi, I do believe is the idea of building community. I think it kind of I think it's all about community, community. That's what's at the core, because I think in our world today, that the epidemic of loneliness, the separation between people and peoples, is a real threat to society and a threat to each and every individual. Because I think that we need human connection. We are social beings by design, and we need communal connection. And I think in so many ways, communal connections are being broken down, and there aren't the same community institutions, all that sense of being part of the same community that there once was. Even in this country as a whole, the division that we see, are we part of one nation even in that way? Do we see ourselves in that way anymore? And I think that the importance of establishing community and providing that framework in a Jewish communal context for my people and the work that I do to be part of something bigger than themselves is so important. As part of that, then, is that sense of how do we, despite the challenges of the world, not ignoring them, not neglecting them, we still need to respond and still need to be active, but how do we lean into the joy of being Jewish? And that's the aspiration, like a community built on Jewish joy, where people come together for the positives, for the nurturing, for the inspiration, for the community, for the education, for all the things that Judaism at its best can give, rather than sometimes we have those negative drivers of identity. They're always going to be there, and we have to, again, more work responding than I would like, but that's the nature of the job. And in the vision, I also think that for me, a really important element of my vision of the work that we do is to recognize that the world's huge, and I'd love to make a difference in the whole world, but that's a ridiculous aspiration to have from sat here where we are. But I can make sure that Wayland, Metro West, maybe even the greater Boston area, that's where I want to have a difference for our community. And I think that's where we really want to make sure that we're engaging in all of these issues and these subjects and topics that are contemporary and urgent in the current world. And I think that there's, again, that power that a group of committed individuals coming together in community can make a difference, and making a difference in terms of challenging those things that are wrong, in terms of making sure that people are included, welcomed in, embraced. And I think that's what I'm aspiring to do here, is really find that way to build a community that brings people in and ensures that in our area, we can say that we're making a difference for the Jewish community and for the wider world, because I think that's the other piece. Judaism always has to be that balance between particularism and universalism. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. And I think we have to remember that we're part of the Jewish people, and that's something that's important, vital to who we are. And that does mean care for the Jewish community, but it doesn't mean ignoring the issues that are out there. And it's how we balance those two that is so important. And I think challenging in today's world, because I think today the mindset of people is either to go fully universal, like I'm going to ignore the difference at all, I'm going to universalize everything, or to build the wall, say I'm just going to be only me, and build the fence in that way. And I think we've got to challenge that and really be both and find those ways to embrace both elements of our identity and who we are and what we can do and what we can be at our best.
And, I'm outside of the Boston area, and when I look at it from afar, I mean, it's really an amazing hub for so many things Jewish. I really see it as a place being a cultural export point of Jewish culture, across the country and the world. Talk a little bit about that. You came to Boston for a reason. it has superpowers here that mesh well with your vision. Do you agree with what I'm saying as far as Boston, the characteristic, and do you think Boston will in this area play a bigger role in Jewish life?
I think it does, and I think it's really interesting. So I grew up in London, which is a nice-sized Jewish community, um, but it's limited by the Jewish population there, and also by other elements of kind of just different British identity pieces and the religious communal divisions, etc. I spent time in LA, I spent time in New York, which really are two of the centers of Jewish life in terms of numbers and in terms of things that are happening there, and amazing things. But there are also things that are happening on a scale and with budgets that are not necessarily replicable anywhere else.
No way.
And when I was leaving New York and looking for a place to be, we wanted to stay on the East Coast. That was important to us, just in terms of where family are and different elements.
Right.
And I'd spent, before coming to interview at Shir Tikva, 3 days in Boston on a conference. So I didn't know Boston from anything, but there was something about my sense of Boston and New England that I felt interested in. And I think what it comes down to, and what I've seen of being here, Boston is a place that is built on kind of education and also that kind of sense of that working class community, if you will. I think those are some of the characteristics of the area, and that leads to a kind of sense of solidarity, looking out for one another, the kind of context of supporting each other, and being, we're not this and we're not that, but we are proud to be Boston. And with that sense of education and the kind of concentration of higher education institutions that are here, it means that learning is taken seriously, and alongside that, the potential of pushing the boundaries of learning is taken seriously as something that can be done and important work. And so I think it allows Boston, for the size of community, to have an outsized influence in terms of the impact it can have, because I think it's a place that attracts people who want to innovate, who want to think deeply about the major topics, and that forces the kind of Jewish leadership to respond to that context and to therefore be pushing the boundaries. And one of the things that I really hope that we continue to do at Shir Tikva is that we're not the biggest. We don't aspire to be the biggest. We aspire to build something here that is relevant and meaningful for our community. But I hope that what we're doing is also replicable for others, because we're not doing it with millions of dollars in that way. We're not doing it with thousands of members. We're doing it in a way that actually, I think, the suburban synagogue model as a future can be really impactful. And I think one of the things that I saw in Shir Tikva when I was coming here, and I see it in Boston as well, was that appetite for imagining what might be possible. And so I always talk about the reading the job description for the senior rabbinic role. They wanted someone who was going to come in and take this community forward and reimagine what this community could be. And that was what I wanted to be engaged in, is reimagining what can the Jewish community look like, not serving yesterday, not even necessarily just serving today, but serving today and tomorrow. And I think that's the crucial piece, because I think that often the critique of religion and the critique of Judaism and Jewish religion in particular is about models that are outdated. But the core, the essence, is so powerful, so beautiful, that it's how do we kind of unlock that core to make it, to translate it into a language that speaks to today and tomorrow. And I think that's the challenge of Judaism, because I think Judaism has answers to so many of today's contemporary problems, so many of the challenges that our world is facing. Right. I sometimes say we just have bad packaging historically, and or the assumption about what Judaism is doesn't fit with what we're really doing.
It's old or outdated,
all that kind of stuff. And the example that I always give for Shir Tikva is Shir Tikva has this Musar curriculum, and these groups doing Musar, that is this Jewish ethical teaching. Hundreds of the members have done that, hundreds, and it's permeated every area of life. And if you'd have said 20 years ago that Musar was going to be at the core of what Shir Tikva was doing, everyone would have laughed at you, because Musar was this fringe Jewish idea that people weren't even talking about.
Right.
But it was a Jewish idea that resonates and speaks to the contemporary experience. And when the transmission is given in the correct way, suddenly you connect all these people. And I have so many members and so many people around here who talk about the impact Mussar has on their life and how they're living more positive lives today through that learning and through that understanding. And I think that's what Judaism at its best can do and does do. There's a reason this religion has survived this many years and through this many challenges. If it didn't have something of value, of worth to give to the world, to contribute to its members and the world as a whole, we'd be gone. It just wouldn't have survived. And the genius in some ways of the rabbis was the way that they managed to find a way for Judaism to survive after the Second Temple destruction without a homeland. I mean, there were still Jews obviously in Israel throughout, but without a kind of established center in the way that the religion had previous functioned. They found a new way for the religion to continue and to go into the next generation and to continue to resonate. And again, through thousands of years, if there was no value in this, if there was no meaning in this, it wouldn't be here, because the marketplace of ideas and of concepts would have pushed it out. But there is value, there is real resonance for what people need today in Judaism. The most obvious is, of course, Shabbat, that idea of a day of rest, switching off 25 hours once a week as a minimum. It's a revolutionary idea when it's introduced, but it's still probably the most important thing, that if everyone could do that, how much better would all of our qualities of life be than they are today? And again, it's there's so much wisdom in there, and we just have to find a way to share it in a way that people can access it and not think, oh, it's from this stuffy old book and from thousands of years ago, but actually translate it in ways that speak to the modern world and offer lessons that people need, want, and can receive.
Amazing. I'm so delighted that you unpacked all these things, because I mean, our wonderful, your colleague, my cousin in common, shared Mussar with me. And while I was on a journey through Kabbalah, seeking what I eventually found in Mussar, I mean, you're right. And it's so nice to hear how echoed it's occurred here in this community. So it seems to me too, Danny, that like we have some digging to do in Judaism, where we're going to find some gems that have been, in the earth or lost or put to the fringe and things like that. And that all of a sudden the right archaeologist or individual could change an entire community, right? And have it even ripple more outward. I was curious, let's just say a TARDIS drops in the parking lot outside. Okay.
Yeah.
And the doctor gets out and says, Danny, I need you. Okay. You're given a one-way trip to make a difference in the Jewish community, right? Like here and elsewhere where we're setting it up. Where and when would you go?
Wow. To go anywhere to make a difference in the Jewish community.
Yeah. You can go back in time and change something and Marty McFly it, or you could jump ahead, right? And what do you think?
It's such an interesting question, because I think there's this element of going back in time. As much as there have been horrible periods of Jewish history and terrible things that have happened, we're still here. And to change anything, would that jeopardize the survival to this moment? And I think that's one of the questions that you get in Doctor Who and in basically any time travel sci-fi of what might be impacted by changing something that you think is going to be positive. There is a Doctor Who episode called Let's Kill Hitler, which is where the premise of someone associated with the companion ends up in the TARDIS with the Doctor and says, we've got a time machine, we can go anywhere, let's kill Hitler. And it leads to this, whatever happens in that narrative. And and I think there's some interesting elements of going back is tricky and challenging in terms of the risks that well, of course things could be better, and there could be other things in the Jewish community. There could be millions more Jews were we to go back and, for example, prevent the Holocaust happening.
That's right.
But
Right.
but I don't know what would be the ripples of that, and that's always the danger. I've always thought for myself personally that I would have. I don't know if I still feel it this way today. I'd have to think about it, but I always thought that being there in the generation of my grandfather in Israel at the foundation of the state would have been really powerful to have had a part in that and to have played a part in that. And I think there are elements of just even recent Jewish and Israeli history of things that missed opportunities, maybe things that could have happened, and where the way things could have worked out at different moments. But it's really hard to kind of want to go back, and the risk of changing something, I think, is just immense of what could be the outcome. And I will say personally, in the last several years, I think we can acknowledge we're living through challenging times in terms of anti-Semitism. We lived through a pandemic. We lived through October 7th and the after effect of that.
Right.
And at points I felt this weight off the moment that we're living in. Like, wow, these are really tough challenges that we're facing. And the source of comfort that I keep coming back to, again, Jewish text unsurprisingly, is in the book of Esther, the story that we read at Purim, where Esther is the king's wife, but it's risky to go speak to the king. It's not the kind of thing where they can just talk to each other every day. Right. And Mordecai is asking her that she needs to go speak to the king to try and save the Jewish people, essentially. And the line is along the lines, maybe you were put in this position just for a time like this. And that's been my go-to piece, that for all the challenges, maybe that's it. Like these are the challenges I'm supposed to face. We don't get to choose the challenges. We don't get to choose what are the circumstances, global and local, that we're going to face. We get to choose how we respond. And I choose to focus on responding to the contemporary, with an awareness maybe of things that we could have done different or would have done different in the past and how we want the future to look. But I think that our challenges are our challenges, and we just got to make the best of what we can do with them, because a TARDIS is unlikely to fall out of the sky and then offer us that chance. But I do think that's been my sense of, rather than kind of wanting, because I will say, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I think happened 2.5 years into me being the senior rabbi here.
Wow.
And I remember talking to my friend and colleague, Rabbi Erwin Zeplowitz, who was the senior rabbi that I worked with in Port Washington, and saying to him, I couldn't have been your associate for this. Like, you could have dealt with it and I could have been the associate. It would have been much easier. And he made some comment about that. This is your challenge. This is your moment. You got to do it. Yeah. And I really think that resonates, that we have our moment, we have our challenge, and we have to face our challenge and our moment to the best that we can, and not worry about whether we could have lived in a different time or space. And again, I think that's part of the Star Wars motif, if you will, to take it back to the beginning in some ways, that in episode 4, very specifically, it's not Obi-Wan's moment anymore. It's time for Luke and the next generation. And in many ways, Obi-Wan has to die for Luke, Leia, and Han to take their place as the ones who are going to take the story forward. And I think those are his challenges. Obi-Wan had his battles, which thankfully with the expanding universe, we see them illustrated, and we've watched them.
Pretty awesome. Yeah.
But the challenge of Darth Vader, the Death Star, the Emperor, those aren't his. Those are Luke's, and he has to be the one with Leia and with Han Solo, all of the gang, if you will, facing them.
Yeah.
And I think that's, for me, that's that piece. We will end up being the right people for the situation, whatever the situation is, as long as we choose to respond. And so kind of that doesn't answer the question, but I think
you
it kind of
sidestepped the
offers a
whole thing,
different
but it was brilliant. So I'm going to
a different response to it.
that one. Well said, right? It's like don't mess with time.
It's risky.
It's very risky, you know. That's why Marty McFly, you know, it became the single pine mall instead of the twin, right? Because they ran over the pine tree with the car. Well, Danny, this has been mind expanding and just very fulfilling. Thank you so much for your time. What's something that's going on right now for you that's super cool that you want to share with our audience?
Something super cool at the moment. So I think there is something wonderful that I'm seeing in Jewish community, in the way that people are engaging with their Judaism, that despite the challenges of the contemporary world, despite lots of the things that are out there, people are engaging with Judaism and with Jewish community in new and exciting ways, and really want to be here. They want to be part of this community, engaging with it, finding meaning, finding their people, finding their place. That's amazing to me. I mean, I think that we get to be this growing synagogue despite everything that's going on there and outside, and that's amazing, and that's wonderful. And I think there's something very special about that. I think that in terms of the world, and these are challenging times, and I think we just have to own that and recognize that and choose how we want to respond to that. And I'm always inspired by, especially around here, the young people and the work that they do, and the fact that they are still trying to make a difference, and that they're trying to do what they can to make sure that we leave this world better than we found it. And I think that's amazing in terms of what we can do, what we can achieve, what the world can be. And I think for me, in some ways, I think part of watching Andor on repeat, which would be my sci-fi recommendation if I were offering one, which I'm sure other people have got to, but is that it's that hopeful story that against, in a difficult situation, resonates for the world today. You can make a difference. Even one individual can make a difference. And I love that. His mother, the mother figure, when she talks about kind of waking up and doing what she can, that even she wants to take down the empire, even in her
Padme. Right. Or no, not Padme.
In Cassian's mother, whose name I'm
you're talking about Andor.
Yeah, sorry, Andor. Yeah.
Sorry.
Even that when she's projected and giving that rallying speech and all those kind of things, I think there's something about that continues to resonate. And I just want to, the one other sci-fi motif that is always in my mind is also in Peter Capaldi's Doctor. He talks about be kind. Like, he gives a couple of great monologues, really beautiful monologues about resilience, perseverance. There's just, I really recommend his some of the narratives there. And he talks about that, just be kind. Like, it's not easy. We don't do it because it's easy, but we just got to do it. And I love that idea. And I think that's what I want to keep coming back to in the sci-fi that I watch. That idea of we just got to keep doing it. And I think we see that in our world today.
Amazing. Baruch Hashem. So you mentioned Andor. We have to have folks make sure that they watch that. I have to watch that. I haven't watched it yet.
You haven't watched it?
I've been trying to, apples and orange in my head as you're telling me things, just so I don't get the spoilers, but you did good. So yeah. I'm more interested now.
Andor is, in my opinion, the best addition to the Star Wars universe since Episode 4. Wow. And one of the best TV series, period. Like, it is brilliant, and brilliant for the characters, brilliant for the story, brilliant for the critique of society. And also the way it seamlessly flows. I will say, I find myself, I watch it through, and then I have to watch Rogue One. And it just, you have to. You can't not, and
you
then start again.
The bat to swing all the way, right?
And the way they tied it in, and you've seen Rogue One, I take it.
Yeah, of course.
The way they tied it in I mean, it's beautiful. That, and even some of the lines that you get later in Rogue One, you're gonna have to. I want you to. In my ideal now, you're going to go home. You're just going to watch it now and not do anything for the next 12 hours, and then I want you to call me afterwards and tell me what you thought, because it is just spectacular.
So by Shabbos, I'll
Just start it. Just start it for me. Just get into it, and you'll get hooked.
Hollis recommended it also,
Yeah.
and made it like, you haven't just geek shaming me.
I pushed her on that one as well to watch it. So
Well, it sounds like we need to. So
definitely.
yeah. Anything else that like is in that same vein, that's sci-fi, and then also stuff that like we could recommend for reading? Because you mentioned Musar, right? So like, what are folks reading here that like, or where can they go online to make a connection?
I mean, I think the main thing that people should do is find the community that's near you, see what they're engaging with, and just be part of the community. And then I'm sure there'll be offerings in every place that will resonate, that will be meaningful and powerful in that way. The last book that I read was a book called I See You've Called in Dead, which is about this obituary writer who writes his own obituary in a drunken state and clicks send, so it gets published, and then everything that happens with it. It's a beautiful book, very funny, beautiful messages. I do recommend it thoroughly. That's the most recent thing that I've just read, and it's a great story. I think that there's so much that you can access online, but I think the important thing is to try to find ways to access also in the context of community, because I think that's what makes it more meaningful than just getting lost. That I think that Judaism and religion and this learning is designed to be done not as a solitary endeavor sat in front of a computer screen on your own. It's designed to be done with others, and I think that's really important to find those places to do that.
So find your community,
Yes.
right, and embrace them
Yeah.
dearly. And make them watch Andor.
Yes, 100%.
Well, Danny, I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, ever since we've met, I've always felt like we've had this great connection, and I love learning from you. So excited to share this with the audience, and my friend, we're going to have you back on.
Thank you
There's
very
more
much.
here.
Thank
More
you.
here.
I look forward to continuing the conversation. It's great to see you again, as always. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Jewish Futurism Lab, a weekly independent production of Mike Wirth Art Incorporated. If you are into these conversations, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and drop a rating and a review so more folks can find the show. And to go deeper, hit up MikeWirthArt.com, MikeWirthArt.com, for more episodes, merch, original art, and essays. That is MikeWirthArt.com. And come hang with me on Instagram. I'm at Mike Wirth, MikeWirth. And if you are, or know somebody who is a fascinating Jewish futurist who should be on this microphone with me here, slide into my DMs and tell me who I should talk to next. Until next time, friends, see you in the future.